When we think of Abraham Lincoln, we picture this larger-than-life figure, right? The famous speeches, the presidency. But what if I told you that's only half the story? Today, we're going to dig into the other half, the part about the relentless string of failures that almost stopped him from ever getting there.
I mean, this quote just says it all, doesn't it? It perfectly captures the whole paradox of Abraham Lincoln. Here's a guy who's defined just as much by his staggering losses as he was by his ultimate, world-changing success.
So, where does a story like this even begin? Well, picture this. A simple log cabin, probably pretty dark, lit by a single candle, and there's this young boy, just completely absorbed in a book he had to borrow. This isn't some story about power or privilege. It started with a quiet, almost solitary thirst for knowledge.
What's really incredible about his start is everything he didn't have. I mean, no family money, no powerful connections, and absolutely zero guarantee that any of his hard work would ever pay off. All he had was a dream. That was it.
You'd think that as he grew up, things would start looking up, But they didn't. In fact, the challenges he faced just got bigger, harder, and way more public.
So his first real shot at making something of himself was a small general store, and it was a complete and total failure. It left him drowning in debt. Honestly, for most people, that would have been the end of the story. But for Lincoln, it was just getting started.
And on top of his business going under, he found himself out of a job. It just seemed like for every single step he tried to take forward, life pushed him 2 steps back. A really tough pattern was starting to take shape.
Okay, so what's next? He pivots. He decides, all right, I'll get into politics. I can make a difference there. He puts his name out there, runs for the state legislature back in 1832, and gets absolutely crushed.
And this is where it just gets relentless. He doesn't give up. He runs for the U.S. Senate and loses. He tries to get the vice presidential nomination, and they reject him. He runs for Senate again against Stephen Douglas and loses again. By this point, people were literally laughing at him, telling him, Abe, maybe this just isn't for you. Defeat was becoming his shadow.
But here's the thing. While defeat was a clear pattern, so was this, persistence. With every single loss, something else was growing inside him. It wasn't anger, it wasn't frustration, it was this quiet, unshakable determination.
And this right here, this gets to the absolute core of it. Lincoln wasn't driven by a hunger for power. He was driven by a sense of purpose, this deep-seated belief that he had a real role to play in the future of his country. That's what kept him going when anyone else would have quit.
So that brings us to the big question, right? After all those years, after all that public failure and private heartbreak, what on earth could possibly change this guy's trajectory? I mean, how does someone with a track record like that ever succeed? The answer comes down to this single year. Against all odds, the man who had failed in business, lost election after election, and been dismissed as a nobody, was elected President of the United States. It was an absolutely stunning reversal of fortune.
But reaching the highest office in the land wasn't the end of his struggle. Oh no. In fact, his greatest challenge was just about to begin. The success he had worked his entire life for brought a burden with it that was unlike anything he had ever imagined.
Let's just put this into perspective. His early burdens were tough, for sure, but they were personal. Overcoming financial ruin, dealing with people's doubt. But the presidential burden, that was on a whole different level. We're talking about the survival of an entire nation and the monumental task of uniting a country that was literally tearing itself apart. The stakes couldn't have been higher.
And it turns out, all those years of persistence had forged the exact leader the country desperately needed at that moment. The man who'd been ridiculed learned how to stand firm against division. The guy who faced constant personal defeat learned how to lead with courage in the face of national defeat. His patience was shaped by decades of setbacks. And his vision? Well, his vision was for a healed, unified nation he had always believed in, even when nobody believed in him.
And slowly, it worked. The Civil War finally ended. The nation started the long, painful process of healing. And one night, Lincoln went to a theater, probably just to catch his breath for a second, to enjoy a rare moment of peace. But in one single, tragic moment, a gunshot rang out, and the man who rose from nothing was gone.
He never got to see the full impact of his life's work, but his story endured. And today, we don't really remember Abraham Lincoln for that long, long list of failures. We remember him for the incredible strength that carried him right through them.
So if there's one big lesson to take away from his life, it's got to be this. The measure of a person isn't whether or not they fail. It's about resilience. It's about refusing to let defeat have the final word.
And that leaves us with this final thought. Real success isn't just about winning. It's about finding the courage to keep going, especially when every voice, both outside and inside your own head, is telling you to stop.